So it's 3:10. Let's get cooking. I'm not sure how long this is going to run today. I've got a few things in mind. One of the first things is talking about. I mean, we're doing some maple board stuff. I'm going to run up to Doug's for the next Dane Kings, and we're going to do some stuff together up there. But I thought I'd go over some of my thoughts on maple board refrets because I get a lot of emails from people, and I've had like 5 or 6 where it's like, "Hey, I just pulled some finish off my fingerboard with tape. How do I deal with this?" And so, as you may have noticed in some of my comments, my first notation is that please, like I almost never use tape on especially vintage finish anymore, or just any finish, because it like I will use it occasionally, like if I am 100% sure like it can handle it, but like one of like all of the things that I've had happen pulling finish off, unexpected interaction with the lacquer, like if it's like a newish guitar and the lacquer isn't like 100% bulletproof, like even low tack tape, the adhesive in there can intermingle with the lacquer, and you can, like, if you forget about it and you leave it overnight, you come back the next day, you can have some really interesting reactions for it. So things that I do though, like if I do have to put tape on a guitar, like I'll put it on my, the tacky side, even with low tack tape, put it on my shirt, like really break it down. And then I'll sometimes what I'll do is I'll fold edges over and then make sure that I'm taping onto parts like maybe I tape onto the fingerboard and like it's really stuck onto the fingerboard, and then just kind of loosely stuck over the edge of the fingerboard if I'm like trying to mask it off for spraying or something like that. But anytime you have lacquer and it's like out in the middle of nowhere, like in the middle of a Les Paul or anything with any kind of like big surface area, like smack dab in the middle, just try not to put tape on guitars. The other thing too is like people go blue tape, low tack, great. A lot of times when you're at Home Depot, you might see that the edge lock stuff. Edge lock is like, that's like just a complete recipe for a disaster. Whatever they have in there to make it so that when you pull the tape off, that you've got this beautiful edge, like there's some kind of solvent in there. And I mean, don't use edge lock on lacquer or frog tape. I've heard bad things about frog tape as well. So anyway, let me reiterate, no tape on lacquer. So, and like for me, for instance, like if I was doing a maple refret and I was polishing frets, my thing would be to have like to have the StewMac fret guard, and then I've got this nice tape overage, so it's nice and wide, and then I can put it on here and work on this and use like a drill for polishing, or really roughhouse this and steel wool it if I want, or hit it with 2000 grit sandpaper, and I'm just not ever in risk of like going over and kind of messing with the patina on the finish as it stands. One of the things about it is like finish that is adjacent to metal, like it's pretty difficult to buff a maple board out with your frets there without getting metal stuff all in your buff and having really funky results. So like this is a situation where chocolate and peanut butter and chocolate is not, it's not great. The metal and the finish really, like, they don't like to become shiny together in a buffing situation, in my estimation. So the first step of a maple fingerboard refret is to get the old frets out. The Penachars, we talked a little bit about trying to put these in sideways so we could all get like a nice experience pulling them out sideways. Turned out not to be super efficient, but the Penachars also just did a sideways refret where they took video of pulling frets out sideways. I'll make that available later for people to look at. It's pretty straightforward. There's a couple different ways to do it. One, I've seen people like grab the very end of the fret with here, I'm gonna pin my
Did that send to you, Ian? That video I took?
I didn't see it yet, no.
Okay. I think
But-
I need to press it before I can send it.
Okay. Some people will grab like the very end of the fret with an awl and tap it out. I'd say probably the first 10 maple boards, like old 70s boards, 60s boards that went out sideways, like probably the first 10 of them went out so easy and I felt really heroic. And then I got like my first one that where the fret was like completely blasted down to nothing. And it was snug, like very snug. And boy, those can be challenging. So the other thing I want to say too is like in a lot of this stuff, that snugness that I experienced in a sideways pull, and then the ease of the first ones, like they're all over the place in that. Sometimes they're those easy ones that would come out easy sideways, they'll also come out pretty easy through the top too. Like before we knew about sideways fretting, a lot of frets came out of the top, and it was kind of a crapshoot of how it happened. But I remember a lot of them going pretty good. The ones that did not go good though, they really did not go good in a pretty spectacular way. So my personal way that I do sideways pulls is with one of these and then a screwdriver over the top that I have sharpened. I'll put a nice edge on the screwdriver and then basically grab it wide. A tight metal guard will basically keep you know, as long as you're not like over on the edges, it'll keep it from marring the board. Without the guard and going with the awl on the end, boy, I've seen that, you know, I've seen the awl move, and you know, like anything that goes across the board and unprotected that goes, you know, cross grain across the board, you are off to the races with some pretty serious stuff. You'd probably just be taking the finish off at that point. Anyway, if you weren't trying to avoid taking the finish off. So these guys, the other thing too is Fountain City did a remarkably good job getting finish onto these frets in a way that replicates the problems with the old boards. So the old boards, you know, like especially in the 70s, polyester, chippy, like unbelievably chippy finish that if you do not get the finish off of the fret and you pull it and a little bit is still attached, you can get these awesome chips. So these frets are probably a lot like how they would have come out of the finish room at Fender, which is to say that there's a lot of finish on top of this. So before you start pulling these frets on the boards that you got from Fountain City, you're going to want to take that finish off of the top of it. And so I'm just going to like do something like this with the file, because I'm going to actually heat the fret a little bit. You can do you know, whatever you like at home to get this off of here. I'm going to get down to bare metal on the top and put a flat spot in it, like if you had just done a refret, or you know, you had done a fret level. Has anybody had experience with this tool and then the feeler gauges that are slotted that StewMac sells for anti-chipping? Anybody? Nobody? This is
You're talking about the new puller, the really long one.
yeah, and then they sell a feeler gauge. Let me just grab that really quick just so I have it. So I actually had an opportunity to use these, and I didn't find these to be particularly helpful. Maybe I was using it wrong. Okay. So
I've used those feeler gauges a couple of times, Ian. For most jobs, I'm the same. I haven't found them terribly useful. I had a couple of weird frets with weirdly long tangs, and I found those useful because I could get an extra bit of gap for walking it out.
Yeah.
But then I could also use that to just give a little bit of leverage as well to pull the extra long tangs up. But most cases, I'm the same. I haven't found them terribly useful other than that.
One of the things I'd say is like on chippy boards, like on maple, you're kind of hosed on this, so maybe these are great. But like if you encounter a rosewood board or an ebony board that's chippy, chances are that thing's like dry as a bone. And like before you pull frets or before you even start your fret job, if you suspect that an old piece of wood is just dried out, like oil it up beforehand and give it a couple days of hitting it with some real oil, and you can real fingerboard oil, and you can sometimes avoid the chipping that way. But anyway, so I use heat when I fret, and a while back I was doing a maple board, and I'd always done this X-Acto thing along the lacquer to break it out. And one of the things, I'm pretty handy with an X-Acto blade. I spent some time in a guitar factory, and I am very handy with this, but I noticed that like this is very like you got to be wearing the optivisors, you got to look down, and if you break that joint like just even slightly above or slightly below the actual area where the fret comes in and meets the fingerboard, your chances of chipping really increase at that point. Also, like you're going cross grain with this, and like if you're thinking about ex-girlfriends or something and you wander out, you're doing cross grain damage to the finish, and potentially with one of these to the wood. So I was messing around and heating it up, and I usually use solder to heat it up. I'm not going to do that today, but how many people use water when they heat frets? Anybody? Nobody uses water?
Use water.
We do.
I use water too.
Okay. So then I came in and I took a chisel, and instead of going cross grain with the knife, coming in with the chisel and breaking this like this, I just found to be a lot. It was just a lot clearer that I was getting down to the bottom of the fret. I was also like kind of, the fret comes down and it makes, the finish makes kind of a fillet in there, and that fillet, like it just winds up complicating things. Like if you're going to take the finish off the board anyway, it's not that big of a deal. But I found that in coming in with the chisel and really getting in and making it flat up to where the fret and the fingerboard crease, like it just made the rest of the refret pretty easy. I had to, like I'm breaking the sheen here, and after the frets are out, I would have to go back and sand it out and buff it out again with the frets out of it. But this is how I'm doing it now. And you can see this is like essentially removing, instead of just breaking that line, I'm pulling the finish off the rest of the fret. That was my experience on the last board that I did that was an actual fender as well. Oh, so that being said, I took a look at these guys too, and I was like, I wonder if those would do it as well. And sure enough, it does a pretty good job of breaking that finish line too. I don't know how healthy that is for these. This is my first experience with these guys. I don't know how healthy it is for this. I don't know how good of a technique it is in the long term, but I had some success doing that with these as well. But for the most part, I kind of like doing it with the chisel now. Are we on? Any questions about this? Any pushback on using your chisel to do this?
Do you have that? Do you have the facet that's facing the fingerboard ground flat, or is that?
Oh yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm doing the old, what's that called? Like back chiseling. So my sharpened side is actually down.
Yeah,
so
and is that hollow ground or is that flat ground? Do you flat?
It's hollow ground, but I like so I hollow grind, and then I actually like it's kind of hollow grind heresy, but once it gets flat, like I keep it going. This one's actually in kind of a state of hollow grind. But for the most part, my chisels, unless I like completely wonk out this surface, like which happens, I don't hollow grind it again for some time.
Okay.
I just polish it until it's flat, and then like on this chisel, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass because of how narrow it is, but like on my bigger chisels, it's no problem. You know, you just put a little English on it, you feel where it locks in, and I pull when I sharpen. So anyway. And then, so I've used these to pull frets on this. And I had a really good experience with these. I have the old style StuMac blue handle fret pullers, and these things have been with me since the 90s, and I'm super comfortable with these. And so I'll probably use these. Well, I mean, we'll pull a little bit with the other ones, but this up again. The other thing on maple boards is like you can burn maple pretty easy. So you don't want to like hang out on this like super long on a customer guitar. Like a little bit of heat goes a long way with maple. So let's try to get this. I start these like pretty aggressively. Like on this guy, like I'm gonna like really, and Fountain City, by the way, if none of you have pulled any of these on these, Fountain City pressed these in to within an inch of their lives. Like they really put these in. So this is as challenging a maple fingerboard pull as you're probably ever going to encounter in the wild. Like they really pressed them in. So I always start on the very outside edge. Let's see if I can get a.
You might want to turn so. Yeah, go.
So like way out here like this, like not trying to go in and take a big bite, like the tiniest bite that I can possibly get. And then I press in, and then I clamp down on the very end. And that basically, that starts at the more surface area you're trying to grab, the more you're just going to like grab the edge of the fret and kind of butcher the fret in, and maybe you slip under, maybe you don't. This is, and also the larger the bite that you take, the more chance that you're going to like pull up a chip, I feel. So very end, get it on the end, press it down, press it in, pop it in, and then just start working it across. So these things basically kind of, I feel are to make up for like the technique that I was just doing on this too. Like there's no part of this procedure that is pulling up. I'm not putting any upward force on this. I am simply walking it over like in very minute very minute steps and then just closing the jaw on the pullers and letting the I guess the cam action from the from this actually lift the fret up and out. So that's with these guys. If I was to do that with this guy, I'd probably do something very similar. I'd come in here, see here, I'd probably come in here at the very edge, pop it up, and then walk it across. So I didn't cut the lacquer off of this one. And you can see that I've got myself a pretty spicy oopsie daisy there. So we'll be dealing with oopsie daisies in a second. My oopsie daisy landed, somewhere around here or whatever. So that brings us to any questions about this so far? Is that all like pretty, I don't know, like it took me a while to figure that out. And when I thought about teaching this, like I was like, I wonder how many people are already doing that. I don't know. I see a lot of like kind of examples on Instagram where it seems like it doesn't go that well. I don't have a lot of problems with it kind of doing it that way. Anybody want to say anything about that or ask any questions? It's probably Luthen, like intermediate or intro to Luthen. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is, let's see here, let me pin this again. Giant, everybody see that giant chip? So chips still happen. They can happen for a variety of reasons. I've had chips happen putting frets in the guitar. Like you can just have a set of circumstances that are beyond your control. You do everything right, you get a chip. So I've saved this chip. And I'm going to go over putting a chip back in because there's a couple things that I think are difficult for people. One of the things about CA glues, I'm going to glue this back in with CA. One of the things about CA glues that I think it takes a little while to figure out, but I don't know if you've ever tried to glue something in and hold it with your finger. CA is actually like, it basically goes off with moisture. And when it comes down to it, if you're asking like, does this fingerboard have more moisture than your finger? Chances are that no, it's not. And so when you push it down with your finger, it's gonna adhere to your finger better than it adheres to the project. And I'm guessing almost everybody here has encountered that at some point in luthing. It can be pretty frustrating. So like if this chip fell off of the guitar, this took me a long time to realize, and this is going to sound pretty stupid, but when chips would happen or finished chips would come off of guitars, the first thing I would do for some reason is I would look up in exasperation and curse the heavens that my fortune had turned so ugly on such a beautiful day. But the thing to do is when you resist the urge to roll your eyes or look up when you produce a chip, follow it, like almost like you're, like if you play golf, like just like follow it to the floor, like as to the best of your abilities, keep your eye on that chip as it comes off of the guitar. Because if you can find it, chances are pretty good you're going to save yourself some touch-up stuff. Like I'm going to show you some touch-up stuff on this, but if I had to choose between gluing a chip back in and squinting my eyes out trying to come up with the right color for something, I'd rather put a chip back in. So we'll see if that holds true with this though, because it can be a little spicy to put a chip back in too, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to grab my other X-Acto really quick. Hold on one second. All right. So me and Loctite gel, I hate to sound like an advertisement. Used a lot of different CA projects over the years. We were at Breedlove, we were Jet people. I like Jet CA pretty well. Jet's pretty hard to get a hold of unless you have like a hobby store in your neighbor. I don't know if they sell it online. Seen a lot of, people get a little bit particular about their brands of CA, but in terms of gel, I haven't run into a lot of gel, first of all, from a lot of manufacturers, and I haven't used any that's any better than this. Glue Boost is producing a gel now, and it's a beautiful gel, but it comes in a giant tube. When you break these things apart, they're actually very tiny. And as a matter of fact, hold on a second. You can get these guys in these little tubes here, and this is the best way to get this product. And these tiny little tubes. I'm not saying they're single serving, but once the lid is broke on these things, it's kind of off to the races. I maybe get like 3 or 4 out of them, 3 or 4 uses out of them, and then like I find that the nozzle is cut up. Maybe I'll like slit the end of it and get a few more uses with like a paper clip afterwards. But to me, this is the best way to buy this stuff in these little almost single serving. They make them smaller than this too, but the closest to a single serving container you can get of this stuff, probably the better. The way I would do this, I would approach this is I would put a little bit of gel C on here. I don't know how well that comes up, but here's my little dab of gel CA here. I'd come in, put a little bit of it on the project thusly, kind of spreading it around. I'd take my other knife and get this into place. Thusly. Once again, don't use your fingers. And then here's the real secret, which is I'm going to kick my wax paper, kick it on the wax paper, and then I'm going to press that kicked wax paper into this. Notice how there's a piece of wax paper in between my dumb finger and the project to keep me from adhering my dumb finger to the project, which has happened a lot over the years. The amount of times I've adhesed myself to projects it's embarrassing how many. So that's probably about enough. And then we have, a fairly reasonable chip glued back in there. So any questions on that? This probably has to be sanded and maybe gone over with like a little bit of glue boost to like get the edge 100%, but just so we're, let's see here, just so we're clear, that's this business right here. Any questions about gluing the chip in? You all clear on that? Okay, so let's kind of get this like this. So this chip right here, we're gonna go ahead and say that thing got lost. I got mad. I looked up. It rolled under the bench. It found the parallel dimension, and there's nothing I can do about it. So we're gonna go ahead and touch this up and talk about color and whatnot while we're doing this. So the first thing to do on this is we've got a very hard edge here. This crisp edge where the chip came off is it's impossible to touch up without softening, because what I'm about to show you with shellac, like it basically just creates all of these surface tension issues where like the shellac's gonna like pull the color kind of like up to the edges and make like almost like kind of a hard line around the touch up, in my estimation. So we're going to do a couple things to soften out. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting some. I'm going to kick this first, and then I'm going to put some. I'm going to start filling it with some CA all the way up to that line. Actually, I'm going to grab a paper clip really quick. Paper clips are my number one favorite implement for just garden variety metal. Paper clips are my number one implement for putting CA on stuff. Not being very precious about this, just getting it 100% getting it on the edge. Kick it one more time. Is that, can you guys see that there's like CA in there all the way up to that edge? I don't know. How, I know the bandwidth is kind of stepping on this, but you get the idea, right? Anybody not getting the idea of what I'm doing?
Are you getting that just in the crevice, or are you getting it all the way to the fret slot edge?
Pretty much, you know, like, I mean, I'm a less is more guy. Like, I don't want to do much more touch up than I have to. So I'm like, you know, like I would guess like where the end of the crown of the fret is going to be, and not spend a lot of time like trying to make it perfect all the way up to the slot. You know, like you can, if you want to be sure about it, you can blast the crown, you know, or excuse me, you can blast most of the tang off of a fret and then like stick it up there, and you can get a good idea of whether or not you've touched up enough.
Okay.
So this one's actually pretty far outside. And so here we are again with the, and actually I've got like some work to do. So I'm actually going to chisel just a little bit of this off. Got a little bulbous here. So the what I'm shooting for here is I want to create an area that's not to bare wood, is low enough to accept my color, have clear coat over the top of it, and then feather out that hard edge to where that hard edge, when I'm putting my color on there, I don't have like a very crisp line around it. So I'm actually going to sand over the original area of the chip just a little bit, so that there's like a nice transition between the original finish and the divot that I'm producing. Does that make sense? Anybody unclear on that? I should probably ask.
Are you still using the gel super glue?
That was gel on that, yeah. You could, this is a 220 grit sanding paper. It's sticky. It's basically the StewMac roll sticky. Actually, this is probably just from 3M. Probably got this from Auto Body Tool Mart. It's not nearly as sticky as I'd like it to be, but whatever. So this color, Fountain City knows their finish schedule. They know what color they used on this. They told me, but then I forgot. And I did not buy the color that they bought. And basically I'm trying to mix. I'm using the same product. I know they used a trans tint product, but I'm trying to use the products that I would use to get to the same color, but without having, their bottle of color. If I had their bottle of color and polyester finish, this might be an entirely different project. But I'm using the stuff that I normally use and kind of approaching this in the same way that I would approach it in repair, like having a project where I was like, hey, you know what, I'm not going to, mess around with polyester finish. I'm not going to mess around with, like trying to source, well, if this was a 70s guitar, this was a real, Strat, you'd have lacquer that was yellow by virtue of being old. So that's kind of off the table anyway. This is a simulation. But in terms of like color matching, you have a really good simulation here because we don't know what the color is. We have basically a bunch of the primaries and some of the colors that we can try to get an idea how to mix this stuff. So the other thing that you can do besides the sticky sandpaper, and sometimes I do this too, is I'll grab a piece of regular sandpaper and just glue it to the super glue it to the plexiglass if it's giving me this much trouble like hanging on. I think this is pretty close. We can see that we've got an area there that's divoted. We've got an area there that's not the right color. All that kind of good stuff. So first thing is we've abraded the area around the area of effect, right? So that's essentially sending back a lot of information from this light. I don't know if you can see, but it looks white in comparison. That is kind of a false reading because it's a lower sheen because it's been abraded. If you look at that and you touch up to this because it's adjacent to your touch up, you may match this color remarkably well, put clear coat over the top of it, and then go, why does it look so different? Well, it looks different because you touched up to the sheen that was next to it rather than the sheen that it would ultimately be. That makes sense? So normalize the sheen. You don't have to do it like crazy. You don't have to like buff it out to within an inch of its life. But if you give it just like, like a little bit of shellac around there, you can start to see what that actually looks like without all of the abrasions. The shellac may dry. You may have to do it a couple more times or whatever, but you're kind of in the ballpark. In general, like don't try to touch up in a narrow little area where the sheen is different, or you'll have something that looks good and then you put clear coat over the top of it and it'll look ridiculous. So I'm going to cut like some of the bristles off of this to make a pointier brush. These brushes are garbage too. I bought a bunch of new brushes off of Amazon, and they sent me some, oops, my supply chain trash. So color, pretty easy, right? Amber. Well, I tried this like I've probably tried this 5 times now. The last time I did it, I was fairly happy with the result, but this is still a pretty challenging color for a bunch of different reasons. One of the things about this color is this was done in polyester, and polyester is it's a more diffuse medium than nitrocellulose lacquer. In other words, light goes in and then it comes out in a bunch of different angles, rather than going in and coming straight out and telling you exactly what's happening underneath of it. So a lot of touch up, shellac isn't super diffuse. It's a little more diffuse than most of the lacquer that I use. I wind up touching up using this StuMac rattle can lacquer, and it's really clear. Like, it's super duper clear. Not very diffuse at all. So we add diffusers to the lacquer to try to make up for that a little bit. Also, this color, I don't know what's in it, so I'm having to guess. So I'm going to show you guys a little bit. This is kind of like R&D stuff, but I want to show you kind of like something that's been helping me guess a little bit better, which is an HTML color picker. All right, can everybody see my screen? Make it full screen now. Are we seeing this? So this is the board that I'm working on, right? I took a picture of it, and now I'm able to actually, also I'm under super duper accurate light, like 5500K for almost all of my lights. So it's super accurate. If you took the same, you can imagine if you took the same picture under a red party bulb for whatever reason, I don't know why you would do that, but you would say that, this picture would be remarkably red. Any amount of red in your picture is going to give you an inaccurate result. So if you do like a soft incandescent and it's got, orange or red to it, then you're going to have an inaccurate picture. So I'm dragging this cursor around and looking at different areas of this. Probably wouldn't want to be up here where you're getting the light reflected. This is like, you can see in here that it's giving you white. Probably, don't want to be like right where there's like a major fleck in the maple, or you're going to have like something that's really dark. Like, I would say probably like in this area, something, I don't know, probably like along these lines. So I'm going to get that. Here's my hex over here. And then, can everybody see the cursor? Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hit this. This is starting to give me some information. One of the things that it's telling me here is, I don't know who remembers the chroma / hue, all that original stuff, but in some of the first Ding Kings, we went over this HTML color picker. Here's your hues down here. These are the pure hues. This quadrant up here is your pure hue. Everything on this line is adding white, which is tint. Everything that is on this line is adding black, which is shade. And everything in the middle is adding gray, which is a tone. This is so a little more white than black, and down in this area. So this is a little bit fishy because we're dealing with light here. And in light, they make brown with orange and black make brown. And pigments and stuff, depending on the chemistry, we use all of the primaries together to make brown. I think you can make brown, like a kind of brown with orange and black. Not 100% sure about this, but this is telling me that like this orange in here is kind of like what I'm looking for. This amount of tinkering with the orange and gray is kind of what I'm looking for. Now, it's important to remember that on this, let's see here. Let's go back. It's important to remember that the white information on this, the maple is white. So, when I look at this, I've got to go like, how much of this is in here? This is basically a tool for making educated guesses. This isn't like in Home Depot where you're gonna go down and show them a paint chip, and they're gonna, take a picture of it and then come up with a gallon of paint for you. So, but this is very interesting. So we're like on the yellow side of orange, according to this hue, and we're definitely adding some black and some white to it. Probably, a fair amount to get to this color. So, any questions about that? I have a lot of questions about that. So there's chances are pretty good if you have questions about it. I might not be able to answer it, but I like looking at that stuff just to kind of get an idea what's going on. The other thing,
you share a URL for where to find that?
I could put that. I could put that in the color picker.
Yeah.
So that is, yeah. You know what? Actually, hold on one second. I'll put that in the chat. It's called imagecolorpicker.com. Oops, hold on a second. And it is now in the chat. So the other thing that I would say on there too is if anybody wants to like go deep on this, on there are several different types of color. Like with the color, there are several different types of color schemes, or I don't know what they're. Ted, help me out with this. What are they called? Color. Anyway, there's CMK on there, for instance, which is how printers work, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. If you had those colors and you had a white paper and you printed the ratios of the CMK onto paper, you would come up with a color that was very similar to that. So, all right. Scheme. So anyway, so let's do some painting. So I'm pretty crude about this. For everybody that wants to watch on the best screen for watching me do my color mixing. This is over this one up here. So you can pin that.
Ian Board or Ian Bench? Ian Bench.
Cool.
All right.
So the one that I'm currently pointing at.
So a quick question about that that URL that you were using to inform your color mixing.
Uh-huh.
Do you have that open while you're doing this kind of thing?
If
Screen while you're looking at it?
basically, if I get stumped like a couple times, I go look at it. I got stumped on this. We probably wouldn't have been talking about this if I hadn't got stumped.
Right.
Here is an example of one that I did a couple days ago. Looks good on some angles. It's a little yellow, right? Like it's not coming through on there, but I was getting them where I was getting a little red, I was getting a little yellow, and I was just kind of like, what is going on here with this color? So I did pull that out, and then the one that I did yesterday, actually, after I looked at the color picker and went, oh, okay, let's try it this way, then it was just a little bit better.
Okay.
So yeah. The other thing too is you can conceivably I could color pick my touch up and take a look at what it is about it that I don't like. I probably said this before, but a lot of times if I'm curious about how good my touch up is, I take a picture of it and I start to send it to my friend Hugh. And then immediately I can tell you what Hugh is going to say is wrong with it. And then I don't send it to him, and I have a better idea. For some reason, touch up and self-deception in me, like we are just like, it's almost impossible for me to separate. Like I think things are really good after I get done working them. I mean, why wouldn't they be? I did it and I'm a genius, but then as soon as I take a picture of it to share with somebody, I immediately can tell you what's wrong with it. So okay, so on that thing of white, there is no white dye. You've heard me say this before, and we're using dye for this to make this. We want it to be translucent. You can mess around with putting pigments into things, and I'm going to do that on this. But this is fumed silica. This is available on Amazon. This is sold as something to thicken epoxy, but this is also the stuff that is a flattening agent in all of your lacquers. So if you're using satin lacquer, flat lacquer, matte lacquer, this is the stuff that is in that to flatten it. It's amorphous silica. When I was originally doing this, and I was using shellac flat from Homestead Finishing, Jeff told me, yes, amorphous silica plus some stuff to help it suspend in shellac. And so this is the stuff. This is your flattening agent. If you've ever had a can of satin finish and you noticed that there was like a bunch of stuff at the bottom that you had to stir up in order to get your lacquer ready to shoot, it's this stuff. All right, so shellac. First thing I know this thing is it's yellow. It's got some yellowness to it, right? So I'm gonna add a drop of yellow. Stands to reason. I'm gonna go ahead and add some. I'm gonna go ahead and add some flattening agent to it. Something about like yo in here. And just kind of see how that goes in. So I start stirring with a paintbrush. I'm gonna add just a little bit more. I was telling Doug, you'd be surprised how much you can throw in here and have it still go into solution or still suspend. It's pretty surprising. So if I get it in there and it starts getting a little bit gelatinous, which it is, I'm just gonna spray just a little bit more of the shellac in there, and that'll give it something to cling on to. Now,
So are you pretty much using this stuff instead of shellac flat, Brian?
yeah, pretty much. Shellac, like shellac flat has, like I'm constantly shaking it up. I'm constantly, pouring it. You've got to pour it in. It's just a little bit harder to figure out how to get it in. So one of the things that Jeff kind of clued me in on when I was talking to Jeff Jewett about like vintage amber, he said vintage amber is just lemon yellow plus tobacco brown. And I went, oh shit, like that's genius. You know, like you can really like go look at this and you can go, this is orange. We've done a lot of color theory. We know that yellow and red make orange, but this is actually kind of an amber. It doesn't look like vintage amber to me. It looks like something on the redder scale from vintage amber. So instead of grabbing tobacco brown to start off with, I'm going to grab red. I'm going to grab red mahogany to start looking at my amber. I could grab just red, go in there, and then start adding blue and kind of like, you know, like start making my own brown to mix. But I feel like having the different selections of browns and making your amber based on the red content of the different browns is probably a smarter way. So I've got, just as a for instance, I've got tobacco brown also. I've got medium brown. And these browns together are just going to get me to that. So Sean says there's not a drop of vintage amber in there. So he's giving me hints already. So I'm also, we saw that there was a black component in there, at least on the HTML color picker. I'm gonna look at that. So the first thing I'm gonna add too is I'm gonna add the black, just because once you start changing the value of it, once you start darkening it with the browns, it starts to get very difficult to tell how much black you've added. So I've got a little black on the top of the cup here. I'm going to bring it in. And immediately I'm like, oh my God, that's too much black. And it may be, but like I can come in and hit it with like a little bit more shellac. And once I draw it out or I look at the meniscus, like in concentration, it looks very dark. But once I look at it out on the edge, like it's starting to look like yellow. You know what I'm saying? So it's very tempting to look at that and go, oh my God, that's too black. But if you pull it out on the edge and look at it in the concentration that you're actually going to put it on the project, that's where things start to become more indicative of what you're going to get on the project. So I kind of like the way that looks. It's a little dark. It's maybe a little dark, but it's a good starting point. So I need red in there, and I need it to be, you know, a little bit on the brown side. So I'm going to put a drop of this over here. This is red brown mahogany. I'll come in here, start putting a little bit of red brown mahogany in here. So once again, this is like dark, and this is like really like crazy red looking and crazy black looking. But once I bring it out onto the edge and I start looking at it in the concentrations that I'm potentially going to use, we start to see kind of something a little bit different. The other thing you can do, and this is an old finish touch-up guys thing, is this is a glass microscope slide with very little risk to what you're actually up to. I can come in here on a microscope slide and paint over the top of it and look and basically look down in the concentration that I'm thinking about putting on and get an idea of what that's gonna look like when it goes on there. Can everybody see that? Very low risk. Highly recommend this on guitars where, you know, like any amount of erosion of original finish could be construed as tragic. So any questions about this so far? So I'm liking this. If I wanted to dial this back, like I've got a pretty good concentration here. If I wanted to dial this back and say take it to a little bit more on the yellow side, I might like dump just a little bit of this into a different cup. Hit that cup with some more shellac and then add a drop of yellow to that. That's a good way to take something that's very close. Pardon me. Take something that's very close and then modify it down into a slightly different color or a slightly different concentration without starting completely over and then, you know, mixing through again. Like little modifications of that. Maybe I add more to this and I'm getting closer. And there's times where I might fill like 4 different cups up and then start mixing them together and then creating different, you know, different concentrations of different colors, and maybe, you know, break it back down again and add a little bit of blue. That happens a fair amount. So this, I like. It's a good starting point. I'm gonna take a look at putting some of this on the project here. The other thing too is I really suck at this, but before you even start anything, you should just get yourself a little cup of alcohol going and get ready to keep your brush clean. Like I really kind of really suck with this part of it, and I just get really, I'm gonna start painting color and I don't get my wash cup going, and it's just miserable. Like everything comes off the brush better when it's clean. This shellac shellac dries pretty fast, so your brush is already kind of like on borrowed time. So I grab paper towel real quick. Paper towels over here.
While you're hunting for that, just to mention about the microscope slides.
Yes, sir.
Standard microscope slides have a green hue to them that can be dangerous for touch-up.
Ah,
So
they are a little huey now that I look at it.
yeah, because they're tempered. So if you're gonna do that, which is a great trick, we do that. Extra Crispy and I came up with a brand from Globe Scientific called Diamond White Glass Microscope Slides.
Oh, that's
They're
awesome.
perfect. They're perfectly clear, and they don't you know, add any color to your touch up as you're looking through the glass.
I got a little bit of a dry day happening here in New Jersey, so it's my shellac's going off a little faster than I thought. These it's globbed up just a little bit here. So I've got a couple little, I've got a couple little globs here. And with the shellac, it's actually pretty easy. Made a mess. Actually pretty easy to come back with an X-Acto knife and kind of pull these back off. A lot of times you leave yourself with like enough color to where it looks halfway decent, or it looks like a grain line. It's way worse on the camera than it does in real life. I don't know why that is. I must just have a weird angle on the camera. So once again, my surrounding territory has changed sheen a little bit. So I'm going to come in and change the sheen back. like after all that, I think that turned out just a little bit browner than I was thinking. I'm gonna take that off. I'm gonna do exactly what I said before. Ideally, like you let this dry and then you take it off with abrasives. Like shellac is, especially on nitro, shellac has alcohol in it, which is just enough to bite into the lacquer, enough to where like if you don't let it dry and you just kind of drag it off, you can start like really developing an erosion pattern and start making your project bigger. I'm gonna throw this into here where we were talking about that before. Add a little bit more shellac and add a little drop of yellow. That was actually pretty easy to peel off of the CA, the gel CA. I don't know if you could see that, but that's pretty, actually looks better on the monitor now than the other one, but in real life, it actually looks way too yellow. So I don't know how to handle that. Does that look good on the camera, Doug? Or does it look yellow on the camera?
Point to where your touch-up is. I'm looking for it. Is it right down? Yeah, that's where I thought I was looking. That's a little light. So it's probably a little yellow. Can you tilt the bottom end of your,
Yeah, let me just go over it. I'm gonna do like a little bit of yellow and then a little bit of the other one that was a little on the brown orange side. Stuff's really gone off fast though. So I'm gonna add like a little bit of alcohol to this. How are we looking there?
that's looking pretty good. It's still a little lemony.
A little lemony.
Yeah.
I got some extra cheap brushes. It's not coming off these Chinese brushes very well. So anyway. Oh, the thing I was gonna say, let's take this off one more time. It's still, that's still, even with all of that fumed silica in it, and I'm at the point where I don't really want to add any more fumed silica because it's getting a little gloopy. I'm gonna add just a micro skosh of white pigment to it. This is like one of those things, like it's very easy to go, oh my God, that's great. What if I added more? And then you add more and then it's not great anymore. So just kind of use white pig in dye touch-ups, use white pigment very sparingly, but it will also like kind of act as a diffuser, and it will also like mellow out like a really like crazy looking bright dye situation. So I'm going to add it to the super orange brown stuff. And about like, I don't know if you can see, but I've got like that much on my paintbrush into something about like that. And you can see that it is getting just a little bit milky looking. Now, for all you shellac mixers out there that are touching up with homemade shellac, that is wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. I don't know what it is, but in my experience, pigments and dyes don't work very well in homemade shellac. I use the Zinsser rattle can. I started using this primarily so that I could work with pigments and dyes together. I will say that the canned Zinsser shellac that you buy, you pop the can off, pop the top off, doesn't work in that either. There's something in this stuff that seems to seems to hold pigments and dyes together. Usually what you see when you do this is like the pigment will like kind of separate, kind of float around, the dye does stuff. And then even if you happen to get a pretty good solution together where you can get it onto the guitar afterwards, like the dye floats to the top, the pigment varies to the bottom, and you get a really different look. Never had that problem with this stuff. How's this looking, Doug? Can you see this stuff going on?
That's looking a lot closer. That's good.
So that little bit of pigment, that little bit of white pigment really mellows it out. Okay, so
Can you go over the top of that with some naphtha?
I gotta let it sit for like just a little bit. It really looks a lot better in person than it is on the camera. I don't know what's going on with that. Like it's hitting something a little weird. Let's see if I can find my naphtha.
The camera's reading the combination of colors in your fingerboard there and your bench top.
What's that?
The camera's reading the combination of colors in your on your fingerboard swatch there and your bench top. I'm doing the best it can.
Pretty close to being ready. It's also the camera's on like the hardest angle. Like if I go like strictly over the top with it, like it starts to look a little bit better.
It does.
Let's see, where is it? So that's it with the naphtha over the top of it, Doug.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks nice.
So now we gotta like do something over the top of it to get that locked in. We're dealing with polyester here, so polyester is like you can try shooting lacquer over the top of it. I personally wouldn't do it. So everything that I'm going to do over a poly finish is probably going to be Glue Boost. Glue Boost, every one of the Glue Boost solvents has or products has solvents in it that will actually, like, you know, I could wipe this right back off with it. This is probably it's not much shellac there. I'm not saying it's as dry as it's going to get, but it's certainly dry enough to go back over the top of it. And so that procedure, like a lot like gluing the chip back down, is going to be kick first. So I'm going to kick a paper towel, pretty subtly. I'm not like hosing that down to where it's wet. I'm going to go back over the top of that. Just give it like a quick wipey. Then I'm going to take a Q-tip, give it like a little bit of fill and finish. I don't want this sopping wet. If it's a little wetter than I like, I won't use that paper towel. But I would use a different paper towel and just kind of roll it along there until it's just kind of on there. And then I'm going to like just lightly get some fill and finish on there. Get the surrounding area where you braided and all that. Let that dry. And repeat that one more time. This time you can go like just slightly more aggressively. A little bit more aggressive kick of the paper towel. Go just slightly more aggressively with the fill and finish. Look at this. I've completely messed up my bench. Pad that Q-tip off. And then that's pretty much ready to fill and finish out. And go, where'd it go? So that's pretty much ready to fill and finish out, buff out, and then put a fret in. And it's one of the things is once the frets are in, like it gets harder to look at that on like crazy angles. But like for instance, this chip was like completely out to here and pretty rough.
Yeah,
and what's that?
that's really good. Let me ask you a question about because this is something I struggle with. When trying to fret on top of finish there, your new fret wire isn't necessarily going to be exactly the same size as the cavity that you've got there. And if you're looking at the two different cavities you've got on the picture right there, right next to each other, you've got your touch up with it, which invades the area under the fret pretty well. And then you've got the one next to it, which is thinner by and large, than the overall fret. You've got the touch-up you just did on that side, you would continue along the rest of that slot and work your way all the way across. Would you not?
Yeah, if I was reducing the fret size and I had to like touch up, like say it had like, hundreds in it and I went to 80, yeah, absolutely. There'd be color work. Now, the thing is
what about like if you're going from like 85 to 80 or, just in that ballpark, but because we've all seen lots of those Fender refrets where there's this kind of white stripe next to the fret.
Yeah,
it's minuscule if you set it at the wrong angle. So and that's the part that I've always struggled with, because you're fretting over the finish, then you're running the risk of chipping everything as you're pressing them in.
It's true. Like, I mean, if I was like, the thing is Doug, is like the 70s guitars that this is going to come up on mostly, and maybe like some 60s, like they're not to the value yet where I would like go and do this to like every fret slot within like, a little bit of, what are we talking, like 5 thousandths that you've got to like paint on there.
Right.
But the other thing too, though, is if I mixed up a big jar of something that was pretty close, um, and sealed them all off with something, and then went in and kind of did it en masse with paintbrush, like 5 thousandths of color doesn't have to be all that accurate. Like even like just orange, I have a feeling in 5 thousandths would be better than white, like, and
You would just come in after the fact and kind of cover your tracks that way.
yeah,
I don't-
maybe. Or I might just go, you know what, this guitar isn't worth, spending an well, let's say you got it done in an hour. Is it worth an extra hour? Maybe. Let's say it took like 4 hours to paint each fret slot lovingly with 5 thousandths of extra color. Like, I don't know about that. Like, that doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense. But this technique for like a juicy chip that can happen for any reason. Like, you could be like, some of these things are so chippy, like if you're just like, I know, I'll just blow the fret slots out with compressed air, boom, chip. Like, it's like these things, like I've worked on them where like just like glancing at them would give you a chip. But so we did get some good color, like kind of like how I approach color touch up, and then some interesting concepts about mixing and then changing your mixture and changing your concentration. That's what I was hoping to get today. Any questions about what we got so far? I think we've been at this for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, this section next to the fret looks, perfectly unnoticeable.
Yeah, I think like if it was an expensive guitar and it came in for appraisal, I'd probably find it, and I'd go, somebody refretted a maple board and they were competent at touch up, and God bless them. God bless America. That's what I'd say. So that's what is it Frank Ford says? It looks like it was expertly attended to. I think that's all I've ever been able to accomplish. So any questions? Anybody
What about respraying the fretboard?
We're gonna get to that. We're not doing that today. I think maybe Doug and I are gonna talk about that on the next one. If Doug's
Gotcha, okay.
that. But yeah, blasting all the finish off and then putting a good color on there and an entire lacquer thing. We're gonna approach that a couple ways. We've got people that so Doug, I think, is gonna go over having a completely bare fingerboard that he frets to and then sprays over. I think we have somebody that does it the opposite way. Maybe it's Joel. Sprays first, buffs out, and then frets into the finish. Both of those, I've done both of them, and boy, neither one of them are all that fun. So we'll find out what's what on that.
So on a touch up like you got there, you've got the color and then you got clear over the top of it. And it's hard to tell with the camera angle here. How flat is that as you're looking at the sheen from, the curvature of the fingerboard if you move the thing back and forth? Or do you have any more work to do where you're kind of brushing, fill and finish over the top of that?
I would absolutely, like, it really depends, like, on how it went. But like if I had like a nasty witness line in there, like so I would put more fill and finish on there. I would sand it out and I would buff it out to where it was the same sheen as the fingerboard. If it gave me any resistance with like a crazy layer line and I just had like one or two chips, I might put fill and finish on the sum total of the finish between the two frets, because there would be no layer line then.
Would you ever consider taping off over the top of your line there for your fret from one fret to the next and just and just spraying something and let it level out?
Yeah, probably on lacquer.
Yeah.
On lacquer, I might spray over the whole thing. But on polyester, I would probably fill and finish over the whole thing first. But I don't have a lot of experience spraying polyester. I don't have a lot of experience spraying lacquer over polyester.
When you apply, if you did decide you needed to go from fret slot to slot with your fill and
Mhm.
finish, how are you applying that? Same way you just did your Q-tip, or you?
No. I definitely then I would wipe with paper towel. Just the thing. I think we've done it before, but just so everybody knows, if I was to do this from fret to fret in here, I would, I would have a bunch of paper towels ripped up into this thing. I would have one that was just for kicker. I would kick the paper towel, I'd wipe over it, and then I would have one paper towel that had fill and finish on it. I'd wipe over that. Then I'd toss that one that had fill and finish on it away. I would grab the kicker one, kick it again. You can build a finish pretty fast. Although on this, chances are pretty good too. I mean, you're not building a finish from scratch, so 2 wipes over the top of it would probably be good. Just to illustrate a point too of how I would tape off. Let me grab some tape really quick to do this. I might in fact tape, if I was trying to go between the two spots, I might well tape off, but I would do something grab my tape and make put a fold in it where there was just that much adhesive sticking on it, and then I would put that adhesive just right on the fret edge. God darn, this is too zoomed. But just right on the fret edge. So there's this tape is in here protecting it from the wiping, but it's it's just got just a little bit of adhesive on there. So everything else is folded over. There's no adhesive on this side. So that's some of the kind of I've got a tape, but I don't want to put a big, come in here and put all of this adhesive on there and just really batten that down to the finish that maybe you had started touching this up because you had done this in the first place. So little things like dog earing tape, and figuring out ways to use tape to mask things off, but not actually adhere to the finish. Get used to that concept. Not you, Doug. I know you already know that. Any other questions? Not a single other question?
On that chip,
Say that again?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, just wondering about when you're painting with the brush, how much attention are you taking to painting with any kind of grain lines you're seeing or fleck in the figure of the wood?
So on that, the fleck, I would say I was just trying to cover. Maybe if there was a defect that I was trying to cover, I'd hit it with a hammer or something like that, and I was actually trying to cover something that was a boo-boo, I might paint some fraudulent flecks in there by just going a little heavy with the color. But for the most part on that one, I was mainly just trying to cover and letting the darkness of the fleck influence the color that I was putting on there.
Cool. Okay.
on
And I
that
guess
you rig wound, are you going to put some fill and finish over that to kind of blend it so there's no hard edge or anything?
Yeah, I'd probably go over that with a little bit more fill and finish. I'd probably sand on it for a little bit, see what I got. Maybe it'd line up. I mean, you've got I think you put probably about 40 to 50 thousandths of finish on here. So there's
Sounds about right.
I think there's enough on there to sand it and see if it's good enough first. So
And would you do the same thing on the fret ends if you had any kind of chip up on the side of the frets from wood shrinkage?
very, very similar technique on the fret edge. Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. Going once, going twice. Anybody else? I'm available on email if you want to ask if something occurs to you later. I'm actually starting to get a little bit of a headache because the mics don't work when I have the fans on in here. So if nobody else has any questions, I think that's it. I want everybody to thank Fountain City. Unmute and thanks Fountain City for producing these boards. Like this has been very, I hope this was super instructive. This comes up all the time, like fixing chips on maple boards, and it can really be sad when you pull up a chip. So just, do the best you can. If you got any questions, send me pictures. I'm available.
Thanks,
Everybody
guys.
unmute. Say thank you to Fountain City.
Cheers, boys.
Thank you, guys.
Doing it, Mark.
Thanks, Fountain City. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks,
Take care,
guys.
everybody. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
Good night. Thanks,
Thanks,
Ian.
Ian.